Jennifer sat across from Sarah in their favorite coffee shop, her spoon tracing slow, aimless circles in her cup. Though a faint smile played on her lips, the kind that lingers after a good laugh, her eyes betrayed a far-off look, as if she was lost in thought she hadn't dared to voice. Sarah leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "All right, Jen," Sarah said, her tone light but probing. "What's going on with you and Tom?" The clink of Jennifer's spoon against her mug punctuated her sigh. "Tom's great," she began, her voice measured but uncertain. "He's a good husband. We've been married almost 7 years now," she trailed off, her fingers brushing the rim of the cup. "But sometimes, I can't help wondering, shouldn't there be something more?" It was the kind of confession that hinted at more than just marital restlessness, it carried the weight of questions that could change everything. "Do you know what I mean?" "More?" Sarah repeated, one eyebrow arching knowingly. She'd heard variations of this story before. "Are we talking adventure? Or are we talking passion?" Jennifer nodded slowly, her eyes dropping to the steaming cup in her hands. "Exactly. It's like we've settled into this comfortable routine. Tom thinks everything is perfect, and I don't blame him, but I need something more exciting again, something that makes my heart race." Sarah's face lit up, her curiosity piqued. "Well, let me tell you," she began, lowering her voice and leaning in as if she were sharing a closely guarded secret. "I've been trying something new myself. Ever thought about opening things up? You know, giving yourself some room to explore?" Jennifer's eyes widened in surprise. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Sarah said with a nod, her enthusiasm clear. "My husband and I talked about it, and honestly, it's been incredible for us. Just a little space to be ourselves and feel that spark again. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic, just a chance to breathe, to feel alive. And the crazy part? It's actually brought us closer together." Jennifer let the idea roll around in her head, a strange mix of nervousness and curiosity bubbling up. "But, how do you even bring something like that up? Tom would never see this coming. He'd think I'd lost my mind." "Just be upfront with him," Sarah advised, her tone gentle but firm. "Lay it all out there. This isn't about him, it's about you and what you need. And hey, you might be surprised. He could be open to it. Sometimes, a little shake-up is exactly what a couple needs." Jennifer exhaled slowly, her eyes drifting to the window as she tried to picture how that conversation might go. It hadn't dawned on her yet, but this little exchange was about to set her life on an entirely new course. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Okay, so tell me, how do you even start a conversation like that? What do you say?" Sarah gave her a reassuring smile, her eyes steady. "Honestly, just be straightforward. Guys actually appreciate it more than we think. If you dance around it too much, it'll only confuse him or make him suspicious." Jennifer frowned slightly, her brows knitting together. "But what if he takes it the wrong way? What if he thinks I'm saying I don't love him anymore?" Sarah shook her head firmly. "That's not what this is about, and you need to make that clear. You're not rejecting him, you're sharing something personal. Be real with him, Jen. Tell him how much he means to you, but also that you need to rediscover that spark in yourself. If you explain it the right way, he'll see it's not about him not being enough, it's about you wanting to grow." Jennifer took a shaky breath, nodding as the weight of Sarah's words sank in. "So, I tell him I need to feel more alive, more free, and maybe, just maybe, he'll understand this isn't just about us." She hesitated, chewing on her lip. "But you know Tom, he's all about stability. This isn't the kind of thing he'd ever expect, let alone embrace." Sarah reached over and gave Jennifer's hand a reassuring pat. "If he loves you, Jen, he'll listen. And honestly, if he's willing to hear you out, that's your answer right there. It shows he's open to meeting you halfway, even if this is out of the ordinary. Just trust yourself, and him. The next evening, Jennifer sat at the dining room table with Tom, her heart racing as she replayed the conversation in her head, rehearsing her words one last time. Finally, she drew in a deep breath and decided to take the plunge. "Tom, there's something I've been thinking about," I said, keeping my voice steady, though it came out quieter than I intended. Tom glanced up from his plate, setting his fork down as he gave me his full attention. "What's on your mind, Jen?" I hesitated for a moment, my hands restless as they toyed with the edge of my napkin. "I've been feeling, well, a little unsettled. Not because of us, exactly, but because of me. It's like there's this part of me that needs to experience more, to do things I haven't done yet." Tom didn't say a word, just nodded slightly, his expression thoughtful as he waited for me to continue. "I guess," I went on, taking a breath, "I've been wondering what it might be like if we gave each other a bit of freedom. You know, to explore some things we've never explored before." My eyes searched his face, looking for some sign of understanding. "It's not that I don't love you. I do. I just think we both might feel lighter, maybe, with a little more room to breathe." Tom sat quietly for what felt like forever, his face unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. "So, what you're saying is, you think we should open things up?" My heart was pounding, but I nodded. "Just for a while. Just to see what it's like. I think it could be something good for us." Tom studied me carefully, his gaze steady and calm in a way that made me unsure of what he was feeling. "I get it," he said eventually, his tone soft but firm. "If that's something you need, Jen, I won't stand in your way." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a strange, unsettled feeling. His reaction was so composed, so controlled. I'd braced myself for a fight or at least a debate. Instead, Tom sat there, agreeing without the slightest trace of anger. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms as he looked at me. "This freedom," he said, his voice carrying a subtle sharpness I couldn't quite pin down, "I assume it's something that would go both ways?" I hesitated, caught off guard. I hadn't really thought about what this might mean for him. I just assumed he'd be fine with me taking the lead. Now, under his gaze, I felt a flicker of worry. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I guess it would, if that's what you want too." Tom nodded again, his expression still calm. "Thanks for considering that. I think I get what you're asking for." He exhaled deeply, then locked eyes with me. "I'm okay with it, Jen. What matters to me is that you're happy." I managed to smile, though unease was creeping in. This wasn't how I'd pictured the conversation going. I had been ready to defend myself, but his calm acceptance, and the way he seemed to take it so seriously, left me feeling off balance, like I'd lost control of the situation. "Thanks, Tom," I said quietly. "It really means a lot." He gave me a small smile in return, but there was something in his eyes, something I couldn't quite place, that made my stomach tighten. I couldn't shake the sense that his calmness masked something deeper, something I wasn't ready for. A few days later, Sarah and I stepped into the neon-lit chaos of a downtown nightclub. The air was alive with pulsing beats, laughter, and shouted conversations. The crowd swirled around us, dancing under the flashing lights. I could feel my nerves and excitement mixing into a strange, jittery energy. Sarah grinned and bumped my shoulder playfully. "So, you finally made it. How does it feel?" she asked, her voice raised to compete with the music. I laughed, though it sounded a little shaky even to me. "Honestly, I'm still wrapping my head around it. I talked to Tom, and he was fine with it. No arguments, no anger. He was calm." Sarah's eyebrow arched. "Wow. He sounds pretty understanding. I told you, guys can be more open-minded than we give them credit for." I nodded, trying to let her confidence steady me. "Yeah, I guess you were right. He said he just wanted me to be happy." I hesitated, a small frown tugging at the corners of my mouth. But the way he reacted, it was almost too calm, you know? Like, I was expecting him to push back a little, or at least have more to say. Sarah shrugged, giving me a sly smile. "Maybe he's just one of those guys who doesn't sweat the small stuff." Or, she added with a wink, maybe he's already thinking about what this freedom means for him. Her words made me pause, a flicker of doubt breaking through my nervous excitement. Jessica chuckled, a knowing smirk on her lips. "Probably because he's thinking the same thing you are. Guys love to play it cool, but you know he's already considering his own options. Trust me, this is going to be good for both of you." I tried to brush off my lingering unease and managed a smile, inhaling deeply to steady myself. "So, what about you? Does your husband know you're out here with me tonight?" For a split second, hesitation flickered across Jessica's face, but she quickly recovered, waving a hand dismissively. "Oh, he's off on some camping trip with his buddies. We've got an agreement, remember? No questions, just trust." I squinted at her, my curiosity now piqued. "Wait, you mean he doesn't even ask where you're going or who you're with?" Jessica laughed, her tone light as she took my hand and guided us toward the bar. "Come on, Jen. Of course honesty matters, but that doesn't mean he needs a full play-by-play. It's about having freedom, not reporting in like you're at work." Her words didn't sit quite right, a tiny seed of doubt planting itself in my mind. Had I misunderstood what this arrangement was supposed to be? I thought transparency was part of the deal. But Jessica's breezy confidence was contagious, and I didn't want to overthink things. She ordered us cocktails, raising her glass in a playful toast. To freedom, and new adventures. I laughed and clinked my glass against hers, taking a long sip. The drink was sweet and potent, its warmth spreading quickly through me. Soon, the knot of nerves in my stomach began to unwind, replaced by a light, carefree buzz. As the night went on, I found myself relaxing more with each passing moment. The music thumped in my chest, the drinks flowed endlessly, and Jessica had already made herself at home on the dance floor, pulling me along with her. The energy in the nightclub was electric, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't tied down by anything. Just free. At one point, Jessica leaned in, her voice loud over the music. "Come on. Let's grab another drink. There's someone I want you to meet." Curiosity got the better of me, and I followed her back to the bar. Standing there, grinning, was Charlie, a familiar face from work. But he looked different here, out of his usual office attire. He seemed relaxed, confident, and, I couldn't deny, surprisingly charming. "Jen." Charlie greeted me warmly. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Same to you," I replied, a smile tugging at my lips. Jessica watched the exchange with a smirk, clearly enjoying the moment. She introduced another friend into the group, and soon, the four of us were deep in conversation. Laughter came easy, and Charlie's quick wit and playful attitude made the atmosphere feel light and fun. For the first time in ages, I wasn't worrying about anything, I was just in the moment. The hours slipped by as the drinks and laughter continued to flow. The nightclub buzzed around us, but I barely noticed. Charlie's charm was magnetic, and his presence felt natural in a way I hadn't anticipated. When he suggested we step outside for some fresh air, I hesitated for just a beat before agreeing. Out on the quieter patio, the noise of the club faded into the background. Charlie leaned against the railing, his tone shifting to something softer, more intimate. "You seem different tonight," he said, his voice low. "I like seeing this side of you." I smiled, feeling a flicker of something unfamiliar and exhilarating. Maybe I am different tonight. The conversation turned more personal, and there was a charge in the air, a connection that seemed to grow with every passing word. When his eyes locked with mine, it was as if time slowed. The pull between us was undeniable, and before I fully realized what was happening, we were walking through the quiet streets, heading toward a small motel nearby. The next morning, I woke to soft sunlight filtering through the thin motel curtains. For a moment, I lay there, caught between the lingering thrill of the night and the heavy ache of guilt that was starting to settle in. I slipped out of bed quietly, glancing at Charlie, who was still asleep. His relaxed face reminded me of the freedom I'd sought, the excitement I'd craved. But now, standing there, the reality of it all felt heavier than I had imagined. I dressed quickly, my mind racing with a mixture of emotions. This was what I had wanted, wasn't it? The freedom to explore, to feel alive again. But as I stepped out into the morning air, I couldn't ignore the knot forming in my stomach. The exhilaration of the night before was already fading, leaving behind a strange, hollow feeling I wasn't prepared for. She slipped quietly out of the motel and drove home, her mind spinning like a wheel stuck in mud. When she pulled into the driveway, the house was silent and still, just as she'd expected. Tom was already at work, his schedule as predictable as the sunrise. A flicker of relief passed through me, but it was quickly chased by a deeper unease. Even with his blessing, I couldn't shake the weight of what had happened. That evening, as we sat down to dinner, I found myself studying him, trying to read his mood. Tom, as always, seemed calm and composed, his attention on the meal in front of him. "How was your day?" I ventured, my voice cautious. "Busy," he said simply, setting his fork down for a moment. "Yours?" I swallowed and forced a casual tone. "It was fine. Just ran some errands and spent a little time with Sarah." His eyes flicked up to mine, and for a moment, they lingered. There was no anger there, no confrontation, just a quiet, unreadable calm. "That's good," he said evenly before returning to his plate. I felt my pulse quicken. 100 questions bubbled up in my mind, but none made it past my lips. I wanted to ask him how he felt about this so-called freedom, whether he had any idea of what I'd done, or if he cared at all. Instead, I plastered on a smile and steered the conversation to safer ground, doing my best to ignore the uneasy knot in my stomach. Over the next few weeks, my life became a strange balancing act. My time with Charlie was exhilarating, a thrilling escape from the routine I'd felt trapped in for years. But it wasn't without its cost. Beneath the surface, dread gnawed at me, growing stronger with every passing day. I couldn't tell if Tom knew what was happening or if he simply didn't want to know. His calm demeanor, once comforting, now felt like a wall I couldn't see behind. One evening, as I sat on the couch, my phone in hand, texting Charlie, Tom walked into the room. I froze as he paused in the doorway, his eyes briefly flicking to the screen in my hand. His face held the same faint, unreadable smile it always did. "Everything okay?" he asked, his tone light. I nodded quickly, sliding my phone face down on the cushion beside me. "Yeah, everything's fine." He didn't press me, just gave me a small nod before turning and leaving the room. But the moment lingered, his gaze sticking with me long after he was gone. My heart raced as I sat there, unsure if he suspected something, or if he had already stopped caring. Then one morning, everything came crashing down. I had just returned from a lunch date with Sarah when I walked into the bedroom and noticed something wrong. The closet door was open, and Tom's side was empty. Every suit, every shirt, every tie, gone. My stomach sank as I raced through the house, calling his name. When I reached the nightstand, I saw it, a neat stack of papers, topped with a bold heading that made my breath catch in my throat. Divorce. My hands shook as I picked up the papers, flipping through them in disbelief. Page after page laid it all out, texts, photos, even a detailed report from a private investigator. He had known. He'd known everything. And all this time, while I thought he was calm and understanding, he'd been quietly gathering the evidence he needed to end our marriage on his terms. I sank onto the bed, the weight of the realization pressing down on me. How had I missed this? Every look, every measured response, it had all been part of a plan I hadn't seen coming. I tried calling him, but each time, it went straight to voicemail. I left message after message, my voice trembling as I pleaded for him to call me back. But days passed without a word. When I finally heard from him, it wasn't through Tom, it was through his lawyer. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I could have imagined, and with every new development, it became clearer just how thoroughly he'd outmaneuvered me. The fallout was brutal. News of what had happened spread like wildfire through our small, tight-knit community. People I once considered friends turned cold, their whispers growing louder until they were impossible to ignore. At work, the judgment was swift. My supervisor called me into his office, his expression grim as he informed me that my behavior was under review. By the end of the month, I was let go. My reputation, both personal and professional, lay in ruins. Amanda's life unraveled just as quickly. Tom, ever the methodical planner, had sent everything he'd uncovered about her to her husband, Dan. The evidence was damning, and Dan wasted no time filing for divorce. Amanda's social circle, once so supportive, abandoned her overnight. The whispers about her were harsher than anything I faced, and her isolation was complete. In her anger, Amanda turned on me. She blamed me for everything, her marriage, her friendships, her reputation. She cut me off entirely, leaving me to navigate the wreckage alone. One evening, I finally managed to get Tom to meet me for a conversation. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, the kind of place where silence wrapped around you like a heavy blanket. I felt the weight of every unsaid word pressing down on my chest. Tom, I began, my voice trembling, I made a mistake. I thought it would help us, but I was wrong. I never wanted to hurt you. Can't we just try to fix this? He looked at me, his face calm but distant, the same way he'd been for weeks. Jen, he said evenly, you weren't honest with me, not really. This wasn't about us. It was about you. And when you asked for this freedom, it told me everything I needed to know. Tears slid down my face, hot and unrelenting, as I listened. Deep down, I knew he was right. Every decision I'd made had brought us here, and there was no undoing what I'd done. Tom stood, his movements deliberate, and gave me one last look before walking away. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Jen, he said softly. But it won't be with me. After that, my life became a quiet storm of consequences. The freedom I'd sought, the thrill I'd chased, it had all come with a price I hadn't prepared for. I was left to confront the wreckage alone, haunted by every choice that had led me here. Some doors, I realized too late, once opened, could never truly be closed. The cozy home Tom and I had shared felt foreign now. The empty side of the closet and the space at the dining table that used to be his were constant reminders of what I'd lost. The silence in the house was suffocating, filled only with the echo of my own thoughts. Without Tom, my financial stability crumbled quickly. Bills piled up, and I knew I couldn't afford to keep the house. Selling it was a painful decision, but I had no choice. Moving into a small apartment on the edge of town felt like cruel irony. The freedom I'd pursued now felt like punishment, a life stripped of comfort and connection. My friends disappeared almost as quickly as my savings. People who once shared drinks and laughter with me now avoided eye contact, their polite smiles barely concealing their judgment. The whispers had spread, and everywhere I went, I felt the weight of their stares. Isolation became my new normal. One evening, as I sat alone in my dimly lit apartment, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, a message popped up from Sarah. Sarah ***, I heard you moved out of the house. How are you holding up? ***. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity before typing a response. Me ***, not great.
You?
Asterisk. Her reply came almost immediately. Sarah asterisk asterisk, same. Dan took everything, the house, the car, even my reputation. My family won't even speak to me anymore. Asterisk. I felt a twinge of sympathy for her but couldn't help the bitterness that simmered just below the surface. Sarah had been the one who pushed me toward this. She'd painted it as a way to reignite my life, as though it were some grand adventure. But now, both of us were left standing in the ruins of her so-called advice. We continued texting here and there over the next few weeks. The messages were a mix of half-hearted jokes and mutual venting, but it was clear that the bond we'd once shared was fractured. The trust that had connected us was gone, replaced by a cautious distance. Months passed, and I finally realized I couldn't keep living like this. One cold morning, I found myself standing outside the office of a career counselor. My job prospects had dried up after the scandal, and I knew I needed to start over, even if it meant starting from scratch. Stepping inside, I took a deep breath, determined to carve out a new path. The receptionist smiled at me as I filled out the paperwork. It wasn't much, but it felt like the first step toward piecing my life back together. As I sat down in the waiting area, I told myself that I might not be able to erase the past, but I could still try to build a future, one decision at a time. The counselor, a kind woman with warm eyes and a reassuring demeanor, listened intently as I laid everything out, my mistakes, my regrets, and my fears about starting over. When I finished, she leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but encouraging. "It's clear you've been through a lot," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "But starting over doesn't mean the end of your story. It's a chance to write a new chapter, one where you define who you want to be." I left her office with a small but significant flicker of hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I wasn't standing still anymore. The path ahead might have been unclear, but at least I had taken the first step forward. As the months rolled on, the world around me shifted, and so did my perspective. Little by little, I worked to rebuild my life, starting with the smallest of steps. I took a job at a non-profit organization, a far cry from the corporate world I used to know. The work wasn't glamorous or high-paying, but it gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Helping people, even in small ways, made me feel useful again. My evenings were quiet, spent alone in my tiny apartment, but I began to find a strange comfort in the stillness. I started journaling, letting my thoughts and emotions pour out onto the pages. Writing became a kind of therapy, helping me untangle the web of guilt, sorrow, and reflection that had wrapped around my heart. Over time, those nightly sessions turned into a ritual, a way to process my pain and make sense of the choices that had led me here. One evening, as I sat on my balcony, a soft breeze carrying the fading warmth of the day, I let my eyes follow the sunset. In that moment, I realized something profound. Freedom wasn't about breaking rules or chasing fleeting excitement. It was about being true to myself and the people I cared about. I had spent so much time looking outward for answers, only to discover that what I really needed had been within me all along. The journey was far from easy, but it transformed me. Piece by piece, I started building a life that felt more honest and grounded. It was simpler, quieter, but it felt real. I didn't hear from Tom again, though his absence left a space in my life that I occasionally wondered about. A small part of me hoped he had found peace and happiness, even if it wasn't with me. As for Sarah, our friendship had faded into the background, fractured by everything we had been through. We exchanged occasional messages, but the connection we once shared was gone. I didn't hold resentment toward her, after all, we had both played a part in what happened. But I also knew that some relationships, like broken glass, couldn't be pieced back together without leaving jagged edges. Over the years, I began to find joy in the small moments, the satisfaction of a job well done, the simple pleasure of a good book, or a quiet walk through the park. My mistakes were still a part of me, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they served as reminders, lessons etched into my story, proof of how far I'd come. And though I had lost much, I had gained something invaluable, a deeper understanding of myself and the strength to face whatever the future might hold. Years passed, and life found a steady rhythm. The sharp sting of my past choices dulled over time, becoming a quiet hum rather than the loud, suffocating ache they once were. I had learned to live with the consequences, and in doing so, I had grown stronger and wiser. My work at the nonprofit became one of the cornerstones of my life. Helping others, whether by organizing community events or supporting struggling families, gave me a sense of purpose I had never experienced before. Each small success reminded me of the value of focusing on something bigger than myself. It was a stark contrast to the self-centered decisions that had once defined my life. One afternoon, as I prepared for an upcoming charity fundraiser, an email popped into my inbox. The subject line stopped me cold. From Tom. My heart raced as I clicked it open, unsure of what I might find. Hi Jen. I hope this email finds you well. I've been meaning to reach out for a while but wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. I recently came across a flyer for your nonprofit's fundraiser, and it reminded me of the work you've always been passionate about, helping people. It's good to see you thriving. I sat there, rereading the message over and over, unsure of how to respond. His words were kind, even warm, and for a moment, they brought back memories of the life we'd once shared. But they also reminded me of how far I'd come since then, how much I'd had to rebuild. Taking a deep breath, I began to type a reply. I'm writing because I wanted to let you know that I've moved on, but in doing so, I've had time to reflect on everything that happened between us. I know we can't change the past, but I want you to know that I don't hold anger toward you anymore. What happened hurt me deeply, but it also taught me a lot about myself and what I need in life. I hope it's done the same for you. Wishing you all the best. Tom. I stared at the email, Mark's, or rather, Tom's, words sinking in. They were kind, almost too kind, and they brought with them a surge of mixed emotions, relief, sadness, and a bittersweet twinge of gratitude. He was right, we'd both grown in ways we couldn't have anticipated back then. It wasn't the kind of closure I had dreamed of, but it was enough. I carefully crafted a reply, short and sincere, thanking him for his honesty and wishing him peace and happiness. Life has a funny way of reconnecting you with your past when you least expect it. At a weekend volunteer event, I ran into Charlie. The moment our eyes met, the air between us thickened with a strange tension. At first, we stumbled over polite greetings, both of us unsure how to handle the shared history lingering between us. But as the hours passed and we worked side by side, the awkwardness eased into something more comfortable, casual conversation, like two acquaintances catching up after years apart. You've changed, Charlie said as we packed up supplies at the end of the day, his tone genuine. In a good way. I smiled, feeling an unexpected mix of pride and humility. So have you? I replied, and for the first time, I felt nothing but calm toward him, no lingering anger, no regret, just quiet acceptance of what had been and what never could be. We said our goodbyes without making plans to reconnect. That chapter of my life felt firmly closed, and I was at peace leaving it that way. A turning point came a few months later when I was invited to speak at a nonprofit leadership conference. Standing in front of an audience felt like stepping into a spotlight I hadn't sought but couldn't turn away from. My heart raced as I shared my story, not the messy, personal details, but the deeper lessons I'd learned about resilience, purpose, and finding meaning after loss. As I spoke, I saw nods of agreement ripple through the room. By the time I finished, the audience broke into applause, the sound washing over me like a tide of validation. In that moment, I realized something I hadn't before: even the most painful parts of life can be transformed into something worthwhile if you let them. Afterward, a young woman approached me, her eyes shining with hope. Your story really resonated with me, she said. I've made mistakes too, and hearing how you rebuilt your life gives me hope. Her words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. I smiled, feeling a mix of humility and gratitude swell in my chest. "Thank you," I said softly. "Just remember, it's never too late to start over." That evening, back in my quiet apartment, I reflected on how far I'd come. I wasn't the same person I'd been when I made those reckless choices in search of excitement. My priorities had shifted, and so had my understanding of what truly mattered. The steady, simple joys of life, the kind I used to take for granted, had become my greatest sources of peace. I still carried the scars of my past, but they didn't define me anymore. Instead, they were reminders of my resilience, markers of the journey I'd taken to get here. Sitting by the window, watching the city lights blink against the night sky, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for in years: contentment. Months turned into years, and life slowly took on a steady rhythm. My work at the nonprofit became more than just a job, it was a calling. As I grew into the role, I earned the position of director, which allowed me to shape the programs we offered and expand the impact we had on the community. It was fulfilling in ways I never thought possible, especially during the darkest moments of my past. My apartment, once a stark reminder of what I'd lost, transformed into a sanctuary. I rediscovered hobbies I had abandoned long ago, like painting and gardening. My weekends were spent tending to a small balcony garden, coaxing blooms and greenery to life. Each new leaf or flower felt like a metaphor for my own growth, slow, steady, and deeply rewarding. Through it all, I learned to savor life's quieter moments. The thrill I had once chased seemed hollow in comparison to the joy of nurturing something real, whether it was a plant, a relationship, or my own sense of self. Though I would always carry the lessons of my past, I finally felt strong enough to embrace the future. One sunny afternoon, as I was volunteering at the local shelter, I met a man named Ethan. He was there helping his teenage son complete community service hours for a school project. There was something about him that immediately put me at ease: his warm smile, his calm demeanor, the way he listened intently when I spoke. We ended up chatting over coffee, sharing bits and pieces of our lives and the paths that had brought us here. Over the next few months, Ethan and I ran into each other often at community events. Each time, our conversations grew a little longer, a little deeper. He told me about his divorce, how it had left him guarded but still hopeful. I shared my own journey, careful at first but finding it surprisingly easy to talk to him. There was no judgment in his eyes, just quiet understanding. One evening, after an event had wrapped up and most of the volunteers had gone home, Ethan lingered for a moment. "Would you like to grab dinner sometime?" he asked, his tone a mix of nervousness and hope. I hesitated, old doubts and memories bubbling up to the surface. But then I looked at him, at the sincerity in his eyes, and something inside me shifted. I nodded, a small smile creeping onto my face. "I'd like that." What began as a tentative step forward slowly blossomed into something unexpected. Ethan and I took our time, building our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and honesty. He wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but we both carried the scars of our pasts with a kind of quiet grace. It felt different this time, less about seeking excitement and more about finding someone who truly saw me for who I was, flaws and all. We talked openly about everything: our fears, our hopes, the mistakes that had shaped us. For the first time, I felt like I was in a partnership where nothing needed to be hidden, where honesty wasn't just a goal but a given. With Ethan, I felt safe. One evening, as we walked along a wooded trail, the sun dipping low on the horizon, Ethan stopped abruptly and turned to face me. "You know," he began, his voice steady but thoughtful, "you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. What you've been through, it could have broken you. But here you are." His words hit me in a way I didn't expect. I smiled, feeling a warmth bloom in my chest. "It took a long time to get here," I admitted, my voice soft. "But I've learned that it's not about erasing the past. It's about accepting it and growing from it. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was mine. The choices I'd made, the good and the bad, had brought me here, to this moment. With Ethan by my side and my career thriving, I felt a peace I hadn't thought possible. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it didn't need to be. It was real, and that was enough. Standing on my balcony one evening, watching the sunset streak the sky with fiery colors, I felt a quiet gratitude settle over me. For the strength I'd found in myself. For the people who had helped me along the way. For the life I was building, one step at a time. As the years went by, my life unfolded in ways I never could have predicted. Ethan and I grew closer, building a life together that was defined by love, respect, and a mutual understanding of what really mattered. Our days were filled with quiet moments of intimacy, shared laughter, and a sense of partnership I hadn't thought I'd ever find again. One rainy evening, we sat curled up on my couch, an old black and white movie playing softly in the background. The sound of raindrops against the window filled the silence between us. Ethan turned to me, his expression serious but gentle. His eyes met mine, and I could feel the weight of whatever he was about to say. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low but steady. "About us. About the future." I held my breath, my heart quickening. Whatever was coming next, I felt ready to hear it, not because life was perfect, but because I finally understood the strength of what we'd built together. "I've been thinking," Ethan began, his voice steady as he reached for my hand. "We've both been through so much, but I can't imagine my life without you. You've shown me what it means to truly heal and move forward. I want us to build a future together, if you're ready." A lump formed in my throat, and I blinked back tears. For so long, I had believed that my mistakes had closed the door on love and happiness. But Ethan's words reminded me that redemption and new beginnings were always possible. "I'd like that too," I said softly, my voice trembling with emotion as I met his steady gaze. Our wedding was as simple as our love was profound. We chose to hold the ceremony in the garden of the nonprofit where we'd first met, surrounded by close friends, a handful of colleagues, and Ethan's teenage son, Sam. The air was alive with the hum of laughter and the delicate scent of blooming flowers. Under a canopy of twinkling lights, Ethan and I exchanged vows that weren't about perfection, but about partnership, about embracing the messy, beautiful reality of life together. As I stood there with him, the sound of applause and the sight of smiling faces around us faded. All I felt was peace. This wasn't the life I had once imagined for myself, but it was better, it was authentic, rooted in love and resilience. Life didn't slow down after the wedding, but it felt fuller, richer. My work at the nonprofit flourished as the organization became a cornerstone of the community. I found myself mentoring young women who were navigating their own storms, sharing my story with them not as a cautionary tale but as a testament to the strength they could find within themselves. My journey became a beacon of hope for those who thought they had reached a dead end. One sunny afternoon during a bustling community event, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd. Amanda. She looked older, her face lined with experience, but there was still a spark in her eyes. It had been years since we'd spoken, and I wasn't sure what to expect. "Lauren," she said, her voice carrying a note of hesitance. "I heard about the work you've been doing. It's incredible." I offered a cautious smile, unsure of where this was headed. "Thanks, Amanda." She sighed, her gaze dropping to the ground before meeting mine again. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. I think we both got caught up in something we didn't fully understand, and we both paid for it." Her words stirred something in me. I nodded slowly, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't fully name. "We did. But I think we've both grown from it too." Amanda's lips curved into a faint smile. "You've done amazing things, Lauren. I'm happy for you." As she turned and walked away, I felt an unexpected wave of relief. Our friendship had ended in a painful, messy way, but this brief moment felt like a soft closure, a quiet acknowledgement that we'd both moved forward in our own ways. Years later, I sat on the porch of the home Ethan and I now shared, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The golden light stretched across the landscape, and the sound of birdsong filled the air. Time had left its mark on my face, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I thought about the path that had led me here, the mistakes, the heartbreak, the lessons, and the healing. Each choice I'd made, right or wrong, had shaped the woman I'd become. Life had tested me, broken me in places, but it had also given me the chance to rebuild, to rediscover who I was, and to love again. I knew there were no guarantees, no perfectly wrapped endings, but I was okay with that. I had learned to find beauty in the imperfections and strength in the journey. Ethan joined me on the porch, a steaming mug of tea in his hand. He placed his free hand over mine, his touch warm and grounding. I turned to him and smiled, grateful for the quiet joy of our life together. I had discovered that happiness wasn't about chasing fleeting excitement or escaping from reality. It was about finding purpose in the moments that mattered, in love, in growth, and in the steady rhythm of a life well lived. As the sun dipped lower, casting the world in hues of pink and orange, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The future no longer felt like an uncertain question mark but a promise to keep growing, keep loving, and keep embracing the messy, unpredictable, and beautiful gift of life.